We are in Psalm 90 this week. We are going through the Psalms. And so if you'll turn there, the inscription above says a prayer of Moses, the man of God. This is the only psalm that is attributed to Moses. Most scholars think it's written near the end of Moses' life. So if you remember Moses, he brought the Israelites out of Egypt. God did many mighty wonders, brought them out, and then they went out into the wilderness, into the desert, and God kept providing for them, doing all sorts of stuff, giving them manna to eat in the morning, giving them quail to eat at night, providing water from them from a rock, and yet the people grumbled and grumbled and grumbled, and even wanted to go back to Egypt and become slaves again. And so God made them wander through the wilderness for 40 years to kill off a generation, basically saying that generation who was grumbling, they will not see the promised land. And so right when Moses writes this, that generation has come to an end, and Moses is about to die, and Joshua is about to lead the people into the promised land prior to him writing this. And when we read this, we can really see kind of the context here of everything that had happened up to this point. So let's go ahead and read it. Psalm 90. Lord, you have been our dwelling place in all generations. Before the mountains were brought forth, or ever you had formed the earth and the world, from everlasting to everlasting you are God. You return man to dust and say, return, O children of man. For 1,000 years in your sight are but as yesterday when it is past, or as a watch in the night. You sweep them away as with a flood. They are like a dream, like grass that is renewed in the morning. And in the morning it flourishes and is renewed. In the evening it fades and it withers. For we are brought to an end by your anger. By your wrath we are dismayed. You have set our iniquities before you, our secret sins in the light of your presence. For all our days pass away under your wrath. We bring our years to an end like a sigh. The years of our life are 70, or even by reason of strength 80, yet their span is but toil and trouble. They are soon gone, and we fly away. Who considers the power of your anger and your wrath according to the fear of you? So teach us to number our days, that we may get a heart of wisdom. Return, O Lord, how long? Have pity on your servants. Satisfy us in the morning with your steadfast love, that we may rejoice and be glad all our days. Make us glad for as many days as you have afflicted us, and for as many years as we have seen evil. Let your work be shown to your servants, and your glorious power to their children. Let the favor of the Lord our God be upon us, and establish the work of our hands upon us. Yes, establish the work of our hands. Let's pray. Father, we thank you so much that although you are the great God, the beginning and end, the Alpha and the Omega, and though you created us, and you said it's very good, and although we have all gone our own way and done our own thing, God, you have made a way for us to come back into relationship with you, with the living God. God, I pray as we go through this passage that we would see your magnificence, that we would just begin just to get a glimpse at your majesty and your power and your glory here tonight. And that we would be in absolute awe that the Creator God calls us sons and daughters. God, we love you so much, and we thank you in Jesus' name. Amen. All right, so we're going to go through this little bit by little bit. We start off with verses 1 through 4, and here we see the everlasting God. He says God is from everlasting to everlasting. You are God. For 1,000 years in your sight are but as a yesterday when it is past, or a watch in the night. He starts with, Lord, you have been our dwelling place in all generations. Dwelling place there, he's talking about you have been our refuge, you have been our fortress, our hiding place for all of generations. He's talking about even since the days of Abraham, God has been Israel's true fortress. While earthly fortresses erode and they're susceptible to attack, God is eternal, impenetrable. And then in verse 2 and 4, he says, you are everlasting to everlasting. He's talking about he's the beginning, he's the end, he is the Alpha, he is the Omega. There's never been a moment that God has ceased to exist. That's what makes him God. Now, I don't know about you guys. I start to think about that a little bit. My head starts to hurt a little bit because I can't grasp that. But that's who he is, the Alpha and the Omega, the beginning and the end. If we start in Genesis 1:1, it says, in the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. Now, it's not talking about the beginning of God there. Just in the beginning, God. Before the world and the universe came to be known as we know it, God was there. He has no beginning. He has no end. He is, he was, and he forever will be. It's funny that, like, if we were to choose a word to describe God, we might say he is. Who is God? He is. That's weird, right? Like, I've got a bunch of job references, like being a teacher and a pastor, and like sometimes, you know, they're calling for someone, and you'll get the question, hey, would you describe Joe to us in one word, right? What if you're just like, well, Joe is? They'd be like, excuse me, I think you cut out there. You said Joe is. Joe is what? And be like, no, Joe is. You heard me correctly. They would be like baffled by that, wouldn't they? Yet when God is asked by Moses, what's your name? What should I call you? Who should I say sent me here? What's he say? He says, I am sent you. I am who I am. He is. He just is. It's just mind-blowing to me. In verse 4, it says 1,000 years is like a day to God. It could be like a millisecond. 1 billion years could be like a millisecond to God. It doesn't matter. God is completely outside of time because he has no beginning and no end. Think of your life as a movie, right? And you say your birth is the beginning of the movie, and then your death or whatever, that's the end of the movie. So we're somewhere in the middle of the movie right now. If we're viewing our own lives, we know what's happened, right? We could recount to you what's happened in our lives, but we have no idea what's going to happen. If anything, the last couple of years has shown us that anything can happen. It's a crazy world out there, right? We have no idea what is around the corner. We're just an actor in the play. Like a small actor at that. But God, he's the writer, he's the director, he's the producer of the movie. He knows exactly what's coming because he created it. He set it into motion. He spoke it into existence. Now think of all of history as one big movie. From the beginning of Genesis 1 all the way to Revelation 22. And here we are somewhere in the middle of all that, right? And we know what's happened. We got a couple sneak peeks of what's to come. God has told us. But there's going to be some plot twists around the way that we're not going to be aware of. But there's no surprises with God. He knows exactly what is to come because it's all his. He made it. That's why he can tell us in Revelation what's to come, and he can tell us because he's already seen it. He already knows. Now, Moses brings out this point in our text because he wants the people to trust God. Why would you choose a temporal dwelling place, an earthly fortress, when the creator of all offers to be our refuge, to be our fortress, to be our solitude? Why would we trust in other created beings to lead us and to guide us, who are always changing their ways when the unchangeable creator seeks to lead us? Why would we choose that? Why would we seek the comfort of another extra in the film, right? When the director who knows exactly what's going to happen offers to guide us through this life. Why would we do that? And that's the point Moses is trying to make here. So he goes from the everlasting God, all-powerful, all-knowing creator, and then in verses 5 and 6, he goes into the frailty of men. He says, but you sweep them as with a flood. They are like a dream, like grass that is renewed in the morning. In the morning it flourishes and is renewed. In the evening it fades and it withers. Now he's doing a contrast. God is all-powerful, the eternal creator of all. And now here is man who's impotent. He's a temporal creature. says, by comparison, our lives are like a plant in the dry, arid desert of Israel that sprouts up in the morning and it's looking good, but by night it's scorched because of the heat and it's dead. He says that's what your lives are like compared to God. I want to go ahead and look at, open up to James chapter 4. Also get this idea of our lives being but a vapor or a mist. James writes, Brother Jesus, come now, you who say today or tomorrow we will go into such and such a town and spend a year there and trade and make a profit, yet you do not know what tomorrow will bring. What is your life? For you are a mist that appears for a little time and then it vanishes. Instead, you ought to say, if the Lord wills, we will live and do this or that. As it is, you boast in your arrogance. All such boasting is evil. So whoever knows the right thing to do and fails to do it, for him, it is sin. You remember when I was in Minnesota, I was youth pastor for a summer while the normal youth pastor, he took a sabbatical. And I took a group of kids to like a leadership training up in northern Minnesota. And I went to this, and it was really interesting because, like, you know, I think for the most part, like, the intentions were really good, but, like, they started, like, asking the kids, what do you want? What are your dreams in this life? And then, like, take them, and then we'll throw them in the hat, and it seemed like one of those, you know, name it and claim it, like, just throw this out to God, and he's going to give it to you type deal. And I remember we got, like, a card at the end, like, what did you think? And I wrote down this passage right here. Now, it's totally okay for us to have dreams and aspirations to make plans for our lives. We should do that. But it's always under the guise of, if the Lord wills, in everything, your will be done. All of our plans, I can make all my plans in the world, but at the end of the day, it's God willing. God willing. We have to remember that we're in this film called life, or whatever you want to call it, that we play a minor role. We're an extra. I ask you, like, using this kind of idea, like, how would the director react to an extra who comes up to him and says, you know what? I think we ought to change the scene. I don't like this part of the scene. We ought to do this instead. What's the director going to say? It's not going to go well for that guy, is it? It's going to be like, be quiet. Know your role. You're an extra here. Listen to the director. What is his role? It's to trust the director and to obey his vision of what's going on. And when we look at Moses' day, that's exactly what was happening with this first generation, the grumblers. God was leading them, everything, but they didn't quite like it. They're like, we like a better way, God. Let's go back to Egypt. Let's go back to slavery back there. And they doubted God's way. Instead of trusting in God to guide them to the promised land, they wanted to return to slavery, and they thought their way was better. And they never got to see the promised land because of their stubborn hearts. In verse 12 of our passage, get right back there, it says, so teach us to number our days that we may get a heart of wisdom. He's saying that since our lives are a mere 70 to 80 years, we need to make the most of them by being taught how to number our days so that we have this heart of wisdom. Now, there's a lot to say about wise living just in this verse right here, wisdom. First off, just our heart posture, so teach us. Whenever we are saying, teach me something, that is a humble heart posture. It's a proud heart that says, I don't need to be taught because I already know everything. I'm good. I coached girls basketball for a while. I got to see a lot of those girls basketball players last night. And I always said, I love coaching girls basketball because they're teachable. I would go with the boys sometimes, and the boys all thought, hey, some of them are teachable. I'm not saying all, but a lot of them be like, I already know what's going on here. You can't teach me anything, right? The girls were more humble. They were willing to be taught the game of basketball. And that's what God wants from every single one of us, is to have that heart posture of, God, just teach me. I'm open to your instruction. Proud heart, go back there. Proverbs 28:26, those who trust in themselves are fools, but those who walk in wisdom, in the Lord's wisdom, are kept safe. You look at the Pharisees and the scribes in Jesus' day. Jesus came with this teaching, and they wanted nothing to do with it. Why? Because they had proud hearts. They already thought they knew everything. So one of the first steps of wisdom is just having that humble heart that says, God, I'm teachable. I'm moldable. Teach me. So how do we get that today? I would tell you, before you get into the Word, well, here's teaching right here. You want to know God's teaching? It's right here. You want to know Jesus' teaching? It's right here. But when we come to this book and we seek to read, we say, God, here I am. Would you please just teach me? Please write this on my heart. I want to be a doer of the word, not just a hearer of the word. Mold me. Do what you will with me. That's the beginning of wisdom. The Bible says the beginning of wisdom is the fear of the Lord. And part of that fear is to know that God is eternal. He is immortal. He is all-powerful, and I am not. And when I have that understanding that God is God and I am not, well, it's hard for me to be really proud in that moment, isn't it? Because I see how great he is, and I see just how much like a vapor I am and a mist I am in this life. So what does Moses ask to be taught here? To number his days. What's that mean? He wants to be aware of his own frailty in this life, the brevity of this life, that it's so short. That's how he knows he'll find a heart of wisdom, and he'll get wisdom to know just how short his life is. It's when we know how short this life is that we can make good priorities, when we can make the most of each breath that the Lord gives us. Go ahead and turn over to Luke chapter 12. Jesus tells a parable here. And he told them a parable, saying, the land of a rich man produced plentifully. And he thought to himself, what shall I do? For I have nowhere to store my crops. And he said, I will do this. I will tear down my barns and build larger ones. And there I will store all my grain and my goods. And I will say to my soul, soul, you have ample goods laid up for you for many years. Relax, eat, drink, and be merry. But God said to him, fool, this night your soul is required of you, and the things you have prepared, whose will they be? So is the one who lays up treasure for himself and is not rich towards God. This guy assumed that he had all the time in the world. He did not number his days. And so he lived in a very foolish way. Go ahead and turn over to Luke 19, a couple chapters later. It's another parable that Jesus tells. Verse 12. He said, therefore, a nobleman went into a far country to receive a kingdom for himself and then return. Calling 10 of his servants, he gave them 10 minas. He said to them, engage in business until I come. But his citizens hated him and sent a delegation after him, saying, we do not want this man to reign over us. When he returned, having received the kingdom, he ordered these servants to whom he had given the money to be called to him, that he might know what that they had gained by doing business. The first came before him, saying, Lord, your mina has made 10 minas more. And he said to him, well done, good servant. Because you have been faithful in very little, you shall have authority over 10 cities. And the second came, saying, Lord, your mina has made 5 minas. And he said to him, and you are to be over 5 cities. Then another came, saying, Lord, here is your mina, which I kept laid away in a handkerchief. For I was afraid of you, because you are a severe man. You take what you did not deposit and reap what you did not sow. He said to him, I will condemn you with your own words, you wicked servant. You knew that I was a severe man, taking what I did not deposit and reaping what I did not sow. Why then did you not put my money in the bank, and at the coming I might have collected it with interest? And he said to those who stood by, take the mina from him and give it to the one who has 10 minas. And they said to him, Lord, he has 10 minas. I tell you that to everyone who has more will be given, but from the one who has not, even what he has will be taken away. But as for these enemies of mine, who did not want me to reign over them, bring them here and slaughter them before me." From this parable, we see that God cares very much about how we prioritize our lives here. Each breath that we have is a gift from him, and he expects us to use it for his glory and not to waste it, not to hide it. And when we number our days, we have this sense of urgency to fulfill the task that he has given to us, to make priorities. I'll say this just off the cusp, like, I am so happy with you guys when I see Young Life and Wildlife and the ministries we have outside of this church, and to be filled with people from this congregation. That is making a good use of your time. That is going out and doing God's economy, doing God's work, and making some more meanias for the Lord. We all have our different things we're called to, but I just want to say that off the record. Know that. You make I don't like saying that proud word, because proud's not a good thing, but you do make me, we'll say happy. You make me happy. It's good to see. The other thing it does when we learn to number our days is it leads us to an eternal perspective in life. If I know I have 80 years, maybe 70, maybe I got 42 years and I'm right around the corner. And then comes eternity after that. Am I going to prioritize those temporal things that are all going to pass away and will not endure? Or am I going to prioritize those things in life that have lasting eternal value? What has lasting eternal value in this life? Every soul in this room. Every soul outside of these walls. That's what has lasting eternal value. Our cars, our money, our clothes, everything else will pass away. It's all going to be nothing but dust. What has eternal value? Our neighbors. And so we all have to ask ourselves this question: am I seeking an earthly or a heavenly crown? Am I seeking an earthly reward or a heavenly reward? Because what does Jesus say to the people who are seeking a heavenly or an earthly reward? He's like, they've got the reward. They're good. They've earned it. But it should not be so with you. Our reward is to come. And I'll tell you, young guys and young people here, that I will tell you, and people older than me will tell you even more so, that your conception of what 80 years is and how long 80 years is sure does change the older you get. I can remember being 16, 18, 20 years old and thinking 80 years old is the longest time in the world. I got all my life. I'm 41 now. Halfway there. Seems like it flew by. And so I can tell you that 80 years is nothing. And you hear that from old people all the time. Well, enjoy it now, because before you know it, you're going to be my age, right? It's true. I used to think they were lying. It's true. Okay? It goes by quickly. Teach us to measure our days, God. Next, verse 7 through 11. You see God's righteous anger. He says, "For we are brought to an end by your anger. By your wrath we are dismayed. You have set our iniquities before you, our secret sins in the light of your presence. For all our days pass away under your wrath. We bring our years to an end like a sigh. The years of our life are 70, or even by reason, strength, 80. Yet their span is all but toil and trouble. They are soon gone, and we fly away. Who considers the power of your anger and your wrath according to the fear of you?" I remember a sermon David did a while back, and he was talking about how so many people view God as grandpa. And you know how grandparents are, it's all hey, let's spoil the kids, not a lot of discipline, we're just going to have happy time with the kids and hang out, and it's all fun and laughs, and that's God. He's just a good old happy grandpa in the sky, right? God is never referred to as grandpa in the Bible. God is referred to as father in the Bible. And that fear of the Lord, it is good to have a good, healthy fear of your father, too. Wait till your father gets home. That's not a bad thing right there. I'm not talking in any kind of abusive way or anything like that. But God is a father. It is his job to discipline his children. And that is what we see here. God is not grandpa. God hates sin, straight up. If my son were to rebel against me and just do the other thing, I would hate that. I don't hate him, but I would hate exactly what he did. I would hate it because he shouldn't be doing that, because I'm his father, and I love him very much, and I want the best for him, and I'm looking out for him. So when he goes away from that, I can't stand it, and that's how it is with God and us. Verse 8, it says he's fully aware of all our sin. There's no hiding any of it from him. Really, I think what Moses is getting at in this section of Scripture is, if we are spending our 80 years in this life, the 80 years we get under God's wrath with him angry at us, what an absolutely horrible existence. Go ahead and turn over to Acts 26. There's a phrase that comes up here that I want to speak of, because I think it makes a lot of sense going with this passage. So go to Acts 26, go to verse 12. And this is talking about, Paul is just going over when he was saved. So Paul, then Saul, was a Pharisee, and he was a he was a Pharisee, and he was going on the road to Damascus to go and imprison some Christians. He was a terrorist, basically, going after them, trying to capture them all. And then on the road to Damascus, Jesus met him. And this is recounting that story. So let's go to verse 12. In this connection, I journeyed to Damascus with the authority and commission of the chief priests. At midday, O king, I saw on the way a light from heaven brighter than the sun that shone around me and those who journeyed with me. And we had all fallen to the ground. I heard a voice saying to me in the Hebrew language, Saul, Saul, why are you persecuting me? It is hard for you to kick against the goads. And I said, Who are you, Lord? And the Lord said, I am Jesus, whom you are persecuting. But rise and stand upon your feet, for I have appeared to you for this purpose, to appoint you as a servant and a witness to the things in which you have seen me, and to those in which I will appear to you, delivering you from your people and from the Gentiles to whom I am sending you, to open their eyes so that they may turn from darkness to light and from the power of Satan to God, that they may receive forgiveness of sins and a place among those who are sanctified by faith in me. I really want to just focus on that first little statement. Saul, Saul, why are you persecuting me? It is hard for you to kick against the goads. So a goad, we have to know what that is. So a goad is a large, sharp stick. And so basically, back in the day, you would hook up your plows to your oxen, and then you would try to keep them going, and you would plow or till your ground, right? And oxen, you know what sometimes they would do? They would stop. And so then you would take your goad, your sharp little stick, and give them a little poke to get them going. And so what he's saying here to Saul, he's like, why are you kicking against the goads? It's like he's hurting himself, like he's kicking back, and the goad's getting him even more. Like he's not just getting poked, he's kicking back, and it's getting him, and he's just getting himself poked over and over and over again because he's just struggling and going against what God wants for his life. He's just trying to go his own way the entire time, kicking back, being ornery, being stubborn, and he's just getting it over and over again. Just because he wanted to go his own way. What a horrible existence that would be for 80 years of our life, just to be kicking against the goads. It's exactly what was happening with the Israelites grumbling in the desert. What a horrible existence it was for that first generation. And so it is for anyone with a proud heart who refuses to be taught, who seeks their own way, whose God tries to point them on the way, he's shown them the way, and he keeps calling them, and they just keep kicking against the goads. God has shown us the way, and it's following Jesus. It's a life of faith. So we come to this question here. How can a holy God who hates sin have fellowship with sinful people? This is the dilemma throughout Scripture. Here we have God who created man and woman. When he made man and woman, he said it's very good. They are the prize of his creation. The cats and the dogs don't have anything on the humans, okay? God loves the humans the most. He said it. They're very good. Yet, here are these humans who have all rebelled against him, and according to his law, to his righteous, perfect law, they deserve to die because they have rebelled against their maker, against their creator. So here's God's dilemma. I have these people that I love. I love them dearly, but justice demands that they perish. So what does God do? For God so loved the world that he sent his one and only Son, that whoever believes in him shall not perish but have eternal life. The cross is where the righteousness of God and his love meet. You see, Jesus went on that cross, and for all my sins and all my iniquity and every time I missed the mark, he paid the price for me. Something I can never, ever do for myself. And so God's wrath, his anger, was poured out on his Son in my place. For God so loved the world that he gave his one and only Son. It's like I owed God $10 trillion, and I'm a teacher, so we ain't paying that off. And Jesus came and he paid my debt for me. And so you can't earn that. We don't deserve it. There's nothing you can ever do to earn it back from God. It's all grace. Go ahead and turn over to Matthew chapter 11. The only thing God says to do is to believe in his Son, to turn from living for ourselves and to put our faith in Jesus. Here's Jesus' invitation. Verse 28, "Come to me, all you who labor and are heavy laden, and I will give you rest. Take my yoke upon you and learn from me, for I am gentle and lowly in heart, and you will find rest for your souls. For my yoke is easy and my burden is light." Stop kicking at the goats. Stop trying to save yourself because you're never going to do it. Jesus calls us to take his yoke, which is actually another animal or slavery term, to put his yoke upon us and learn from me. And then it's really interesting. And you will find what? Does he say hard labor? You will find a grueling life that I call it? No, he says you will find rest. It's one of the paradoxes of Christianity. All these guys, all these apostles who follow Jesus, they all introduce themselves for, I am Paul, a slave of Jesus Christ. I am Peter, a slave of Jesus Christ. I am John, a slave of Jesus Christ, a doulos. And I can tell you, this world tells you that true freedom and rest when you go out and you follow your heart and do whatever you want to do and fulfill all your desires in this life. I've done it, I did it, and it's nothing but slavery. You become a slave to yourself and a slave to your desires. The only time I ever found freedom is when I laid it all down and I gave my life to Jesus Christ and I said, "You are my Lord. I serve you, Master." Freedom and slavery. And that's a paradox, but it's true. And anyone who's lived that life can tell you the same exact thing. I could bring a couple people up here right now at least. Probably a handful. Jesus says, "Come to me. Take my yoke upon you." It's all by his grace. We don't earn it. We don't deserve it. He just gives it. And that's the last point, is the grace of God. If we go back to our passage. Verse 12, "So teach us to number our days that we may gain a heart of wisdom. Return, O Lord, how long? Have pity on us, your servants. Satisfy us in the morning with your steadfast love, that we may rejoice and be glad all our days. Make us glad for as many days as you have afflicted us, and for as many years as we have seen evil. Let your work be shown to your servants, and your glorious power to their children. Let the favor of the Lord our God be upon us, and establish the work of our hands upon us. Yes, establish the work of our hands. The grace of God is not just at salvation, but it's throughout our lives. Every bit of this Christian walk is all by the grace of God. Look at what he says here. So teach us. Return, O Lord, satisfy us, make us glad. Let your work be shown to your servants. Let the favor of the Lord God be upon us. All he's crying out there for there is the mercy and the grace of God. He's not saying, help me to do this, do this, do that. He's like, just give me your grace. Just give me. I know I'm not worthy, just give. I depend on that. That's all I need. So that the conclusion of our psalm is this, that since God is eternal and all-powerful and all-knowing and holy, and we are temporal and weak and foolish and sinful, our only option in this life is to depend wholly upon God's grace and his mercy. That's it. There's no other option. Sure, there's other options. You can kick against the goad. But when we see who God is and we see who we are, the only thing we can do is surrender and say, God, please give me your grace. Please have mercy upon me. Our job here is to rely on him to guide us and to trust in his strength to work through us and establish the work of our hands. That's a great, I love that final verse right there. Although we are weak and frail and sinful, God can do amazing things through us when we trust in him and we depend on his grace. I want to say this about us doing God's work here on this earth. It doesn't start with us running around all over the place saying, God, what do I do here? Here. How can I help you, God? How can I do this? You want to know what the beginning of us doing God's work here on this earth is God, I am yours. I am your vessel. You use me however you want to. I have no claim on myself. I belong to you. If there is any pride, if there is any self left in me, would you please crucify it and be done with myself so that I can live fully for you? You want to live for God? That's the starting point right there. If you want to do amazing things for him. And it's from that point that he will fill you and he will show you the way and he will empower you to go and to do his work here on earth. It's all about that heart posture right there. And I ask us, what would it be like if we have 100 people in this room who every day, every morning, every night, everywhere in between are just like, God, here I am. What's it going to be like at school? What's it going to be like at our jobs? What's it going to be like in our neighborhoods, with our families, our friends, our loved ones? God, just use me however you will. So not long after writing this, Moses died, and Yeshua came and led the Israelites into the promised land. And you know what? God fought for them, and they claimed the promised land. All they had to do was trust in God. We're in a very similar place here today as we await our promised land, and we await Yeshua to lead us home. Our job is the same exact thing as it was back then, to trust in him, to trust his strength, to rely and to depend on it, to establish the work of our hands in order to advance his kingdom right here and right now, until that day when we see our King face to face. Let's pray.